I'm here today to ask you for your help. But I also wanted to be here to just thank you for what all of you do every single day for the children in the state of Ohio. Because I know that you have a tough job, I know that it's a stressful job, and I know that it's gotten tougher. And I know that it's gotten more stressful. And it's just a little bit tougher because you have a governor currently who doesn't appreciate your work, who doesn't understand what you go through. So I just wanted to be here first of all to just let you know that both as a candidate and as a governor, really my first job is to basically listen and respect the work that you do every single day. And I want you to hear that from me. Here, in my opinion, is what's gone wrong in its simplest. If you boiled it down into just a couple phrases, what's gone wrong with the state of Ohio in the last 4 years. And that is this. What happened in 2010 is that our state government was really hijacked by a very small group of people. And they are running it for the benefit of a very small group of people. And if you think about it, one of the most basic questions that you can ask somebody is just this. Who do you work for? Who do you work for? Everybody in this room can answer that question because all of you work for the children of the state of Ohio. But if you ask John Kasich, well, I'm not sure what he would say, but the answer to the question of who he works for is he works for a very small group of people who have been running state government for their benefit and for nobody else's benefit. And that's what explains their policies in a whole host of different things, whether it's taxes or economic development policy or voting rights or women's rights. Every single time, all of these policies always just benefit this very small group of people while most people are left out. There's an outside group and there's an inside group. And if you're in the inside group, these have been very, very good years for you. But for everybody else, they've been left out. And I just want to tell you one story before I get to some education-specific comments and suggestions and proposed policies. Because it's more than just education. All of us are in this enterprise together to try to make this state work. A few days ago, actually, it was on Election Day, this past Tuesday, and thank you for your support, by the way, in becoming the Democratic nominee, so thank you for that. We got 83% of the vote. I've never gotten 83% before. We should try to do it one more time. Down to a little town in southeast Ohio called Hannibal, Ohio. Some of you know where it is. But there's an aluminum processing plant down there called Ormet. And last August, the plant shut down, and there were 1,000 workers there. And they weren't teachers, but they were hardworking people. They were represented by the United Steelworkers, and all of them lost their jobs. Now, you may think you know where I'm going with this story, but I'm not actually just telling the story about a plant that got closed and trying to blame it on Governor Kasich. That's not what the story is about. That was bad enough. It's what happened after that I think was just a really telling example of the way that this state has been run under John Kasich. After the plant shut down, all 1,000 workers signed a petition to try to have a conversation with the governor to talk about if there was some way that they could save the plant and save their jobs. Now, before we tell the rest of the story, let's just stop right there for a minute. What's wrong with that picture? You're not supposed to have to collect signatures to beg your elected officials to listen to you in the first place. That's their job. And that same lack of consideration and respect in listening is something that I think people in this room might be familiar with. So sure enough, the 1,000 signatures were collected and the governor still did not have a conversation with them. And then they said, well, maybe we didn't collect enough signatures, so they collected signatures for every worker plus 9 more people, 10,000 signatures, asking the governor for just to listen to them and have a conversation with them. And that was the least they thought that they could expect from their governor. But the sad thing is, ladies and gentlemen, it wouldn't have mattered whether they collected 10,000 signatures or 15,000 signatures or 20,000 signatures or 50,000 signatures. And of course, he still hasn't met with them because he doesn't work for them. It's the most basic question you can ask. If you want to know what somebody's motivation is, you need to know, who do they work for? Now, he is happy to travel all the way to Las Vegas to meet with somebody like Sheldon Adelson, because those are the kinds of people that he works for. And we can see that as the explanation of all the different policies that have been rolled out in the last 4 years, including probably education policy most of all. Now, the thing is about Governor Kasich is he is not a do-nothing governor. I wish he was sometimes, but he has a playbook. It's the same playbook, as you probably all know, that has been followed in state after state after state. And it's the same pattern. And now we see it unfolding right here in front of our eyes. So, they go through a certain list. First of all, you start out by blaming teachers and educators for the problems that we face. That's number one. Secondly, you try to take away their right to organize, which they tried to do through Senate Bill 5, which we stopped. That's number two. The third thing that they do is they cut state support for public schools, and we're all familiar with that. $2 billion, they put some of the money back, but we're still $500 million below funding under the Strickland administration. Fourth, they divert money into for-profit charter schools, no matter how poorly those schools may perform. Fifth, they try to privatize anything and monetize almost anything you can think of in the public school world. And sixth, they use corporate consultants to try to design educational policies with all of their predictable biases and prejudices, while they exclude talking to the people that are actually working in a classroom every day. And seventh, they add more and more standardized testing requirements, while exempting private schools from many of those same requirements. And then eighth, they put all of these unfunded mandates and requirements, like the third grade reading guarantee, into effect. They don't fund them, they don't give an opportunity to really implement them properly, and then they're going to act shocked when they don't work. And then they're going to go right back to the top of the list again and repeat the cycle, 1 through 8 all over again. When those policies predictably fail, they won't accept the blame. They will pass the blame on to the same teachers and educators and staff that have been struggling with all of these ill-conceived policies in the first place. And they're just going to keep doing it over and over and over again until the whole system is privatized. Now, it doesn't have to be this way. We already in this state have all of the ingredients that we need to have the best educational system in the country. I believe that. We have the financial resources to adequately fund our schools in this state. We're just not putting the resources where they belong. We do things like give $10,000 tax cuts to people that don't need them, while starving school districts of the funds that they need. We have the teaching talent in this state. And we have the children that have, I think, unlimited potential. And they have the potential that they need to succeed. But we have to nurture that talent instead of testing it out of existence. We all know this. We all could agree on these things. But I just want to give you hope that there's a way to fix this, because as I have traveled in every single county, all 88 counties in Ohio, I've been in every single one of them, and I've talked to teachers in every single one of them. I always tell people, if I talk to 100 people in a room and 10 people won't let me go and won't let me stop talking to them before I leave, they're probably all teachers, okay? And you can't say no. And I've learned from that. I mean, all of us are products of education. All of us continue to learn from teachers, and I continue to learn from teachers during this campaign. And so I have heard all these stories, and I have never seen a group of people that are experiencing as much stress in their profession as I've seen with teachers right now. And what people have to know is there's a way out of this. There's a way to fix it. Now, it's going to start by throwing out the most anti-education governor we've ever had in this state this November. But that's not enough. That isn't enough. That's just the removal of a negative. That's addition by subtraction. If there's any math teachers here. And it needs to happen. Because all these policies that I mentioned, they're not done yet, okay? One thing you have to give them credit for is they're very determined. They're going to keep pushing this agenda like they are all over the country. And it's going to be propped up by corporate money and out-of-state money, and they're going to keep pushing it. And the only way to send them a message is to throw them out, just like we did with Senate Bill 5. And we can do that. We can do that. Now, let me tell you though, once we get them out of there and we'll have the inauguration, we'll all have a big party, that'll be great. But then it's going to be time to get down to work. And I just want to tell you 6 principles that I want to follow in terms of some of the principles that are going to guide me and my administration as governor. First and foremost is, and this is very basic, and I'm shocked that this needs to be said, but given the last 4 years it does. We're actually going to include educators in decision-making and policy formulation. What a radical idea. To actually include people that are in the classroom on a daily basis instead of blaming them for all of our problems. That's number 1. Number 2, we need to focus more on investing and less on testing. You know, our school funding system was found to be unconstitutional in 1997. It still is. It still is. It was unconstitutional because the state was walking away from their responsibilities to help fund education in local schools through centralized state funding, and that situation has gotten worse. They've taken the 12% out of every new property tax levy. They took $2 billion out of education. They put $1.5 billion back, but a lot of that is going to failing charter schools. So the situation is more dire than it's ever been. And I read a newspaper article today that part of Governor Case's education policies include spending more money on education. That's news to me. If you take $2 billion out and you put $1.5 billion in, I think that's a net cut of $500 million. And that doesn't count all the wasted money on all the consultants and all the charter schools that are some of the worst performing schools in this state. So we are not investing the way that we need to. Third, we've got to acknowledge that this race to privatize our public education system is a race to the bottom. The only people that it is working for are some wealthy for-profit CEOs that are profiting off of this system. We've got to have a child-centered public education system and stop this race towards privatization. Fourth, and I mentioned this earlier, but I want to underline it. Fourth is we've got to end once and for all this completely counterproductive and unhealthy obsession with high-stakes standardized testing. It's bad for students. It's bad for teachers. You have things like the 3rd grade reading guarantee. And the consequences of that, I have said before and I'll say it again, are going to be disastrous. And the writing is already on the wall that that's the way it's going to unfold. The governor ought to step up, and I'm calling on him to do it today. He ought to declare today a moratorium on the consequences of the 3rd grade reading guarantee. He ought to do it right now. Because you don't fix education by just drawing a line in the sand and saying everybody's going to be at grade level because we said so. And when the governor was asked about this the other day, he said, well, they couldn't back down on the 3rd grade reading guarantee because it was not acceptable to have kids drop out of school. Well, if you want kids to drop out of school, I'll tell you what you do. You underfund their schools in the first place, you demoralize their teachers, you create high-stakes testing that half of them aren't going to pass, and then you take all of the fun and the joy and the passion out of learning. That's why kids drop out. Now, fifth, and related to that, we need to support a curriculum in a positive way that addresses the development of the whole child. And that cannot just be reflected on a test. So that includes things like art and music and foreign languages and other things that aren't ever going to show up on a standardized test, because children learn in different ways. And teachers should be allowed to teach in different ways. And to try to create this cookie-cutter system where you say, this is where you're going, and this is the only a teacher told this to me. I was in Zanesville the other day, speaking with some teachers. And they said, what's so wrong about the approach that the state is taking is, they're saying, this is where you're going to go, and this is how you're going to get there. And it's the only way you can get there. Ignoring everything we learned about education, that people learn in different ways and at different paces and in different stages. And again, that's what happens when you have education policies that are designed and implemented by corporate consultants instead of people that are in the classroom. So it all comes back to that. Sixth, there are states in this country that are doing dramatic things when it comes to early childhood education. And we're doing that in my county. One of the things I'm proud of is we make government more efficient and more effective in Cuyahoga County, but we didn't take the proceeds and then turn it into a tax cut for people that didn't need it. We put it into things like expanded universal pre-kindergarten and other forms of early childhood education, and the state of Ohio should do the same thing. And that's not a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. There are Republican states with Republican governors and Republican legislatures that are doing that because they know that you get anywhere from as high in some studies as a 17-to-1 return on your investment when you invest in early childhood education. And if you talk to teachers like I have, and you ask them, okay, we know what the problems are, but what works? They'll tell you over and over again, we can tell the children that we see in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade that had access to early childhood education and which ones didn't. We have a state right now where there's kids starting the 1st grade that have a 500-word vocabulary. And there's kids that are starting the 1st grade with a 5,000-word vocabulary. And that gap is so extreme that our school system will constantly be having to put so many resources just to try to get that child up to grade level. And wouldn't it have been a better decision by Governor Kasich, instead of saying 3rd grade is going to be this arbitrary cutoff, what if he said we're going to put those resources into early childhood education? Wouldn't that have worked a lot better? Now, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but let me just tell you that these are some of the principles that I think can lead the state in a different direction when it comes to education. I know that you're frustrated because I've heard from you. I mean, I have had teachers who they're retiring because they're eligible, but they didn't want to retire, but all of the joy is being taken out of their profession. I've seen it and I've heard it. And we ought to be embarrassed about that as a state that's happening. The job of state government is a lot of different things, but one of the things is to nurture the professionals who've dedicated a portion of their lives to helping our children. Now, it's very fashionable to say that you like teachers, but the proof is in the pudding. What do you actually do to support the teaching profession? But I know that you're frustrated. I know that your students are frustrated and stressed out. I know that your parents are going to be increasingly angry as we have all of these mandates being rolled out. All of us know, all of us in this room know that we're going the wrong way on education, but we're only one election away from changing course. And even though, I want you to know, that even though it feels like this current governor does not respect you, what I also want to let you know, having been in all 88 counties, is that the people in this state do respect you and the work that you do. And they're waiting to hear from you. We've got 6 months to have a real conversation with voters in this state. We've got 6 months where I need your help to do what you do best, which is to help educate people. We lost the election in 2010 because it was a dumbed-down election. It was just about John Kasich saying we had lost so many jobs. People didn't know, including a lot of teachers, what they were signing up for when they got this governor. But we in this room know what we got. But not everybody does. We've got to make this election mean something. We've got to start having those conversations. The most powerful thing in politics is a conversation between two people. And the people in this room are particularly qualified to have those conversations in the next 6 months. Now, this is a classic confrontation between two totally different views on education and what politics and government is really all about. And on the one side, we have motivated volunteers and the teachers of Ohio and working people of Ohio and middle-class people in Ohio. And on the other side, we have an enormous amount of money, an enormous amount of corporate interests. And I'm not naive, ladies and gentlemen. Corporations have an incredible amount of influence in our political system. It's one of the things that's sick and unhealthy about our political system. Remember, back in the 2012 election, Mitt Romney famously said that corporations are people. Do you remember saying that? Well, he said it and John Kasich believes it. But they're wrong. Corporations are not people. No child ever grows up and tells their mother, "Mom, someday I want to grow up and be a corporation." No corporation ever educated a child, or comforted a child, or took care of an elderly parent. No corporation sweats or bleeds or works or sacrifices or has a soul or laughs or cries or can vote. But you can do those things. And what I'm asking you to do in the next 6 months is just work with me, have those conversations we need to have. And it's not just going to be to eliminate a negative, it's going to be build a state and build an education system in this state that's going to fulfill all of the reasons and all the hopes and aspirations that you had when you went into the education field in the first place. And if you'll just work with me for the next 6 months, we can do that if you help me. Thank you very much.